4 years of war against Russia's invaders have made Ukrainian forces experts in drone warfare. And Western allies are starting to benefit from Ukraine's real-world experience on a modern-day battlefield. The British Army, which has trained tens of thousands of Ukrainian troops, is now using the expertise of Ukrainian drone specialists to train British soldiers.
These Ukrainian soldiers have become true experts in drone warfare. They're training in Britain and sharing their combat expertise.
We tell them about our experience on the battlefield.
4 years of war have turned the Ukrainian soldiers into coveted experts.
We came into it with humility and we learned a huge amount very, very quickly.
Training in England. The exact location is secret, as are the names of the Ukrainians receiving training here from Britain and 13 partner nations. In return, the Ukrainians give first-hand reports on the situation at the front.
Our partners have some knowledge of drones, but they have not encountered them in action. They don't fully understand how drones affect the battlefield, or how intense their impact is.
In civilian life, Artem was a project manager and an avid long-distance runner. Now, like the other soldiers from Ukraine, he's a drone specialist. He has first-hand experience on how drone use has changed warfare. Knowledge that instructors in England are eagerly absorbing. Artem is learning from an Australian soldier how to better lead small combat units. He's been fighting at the front since the invasion began.
I'm learning how to command my team, give and receive orders, how to properly assess the situation and lead in critical moments.
Drone technology is now crucial to war. By its own accounts, Ukraine produced an estimated 4 million drones last year alone, becoming masters of the craft. For the British, this expertise is priceless. The Irish Guards, one of the British Army's elite units, spent an entire year working alongside Ukrainian soldiers.
The battlefield and the battlefront in Ukraine is the only place in the world where there's the sheer density of drones in the air. And we couldn't replicate that, even if we had an unlimited budget. The next best thing to replicating it is to learn from the people who've been there. What I wasn't expecting was the degree to which it would be an exchange, and that we would benefit hugely from the experience.
All the regiment's soldiers are now being trained as drone specialists, following the Ukrainian model. They have also recently begun experimenting with a 3D printer, which will be used on the front lines in the future. Technology is advancing rapidly, so the soldiers have to continually adapt the drones and modify them as needed.
Initially, we hadn't necessarily thought that we would be building entire drones. We had imagined using the 3D printers for replacing particular components of broken drones. Actually, we've now gone beyond that, and we're not just doing individual components, we're actually able to do component parts of new drones and potentially build them from scratch. So it's quite an exciting change.
Operating drones is still a training exercise for British soldiers, but for the Ukrainians, it's a bitter reality. After 5 weeks of training and knowledge exchange, Artem is returning to the front. He's armed with new knowledge on how to lead his troops even better. A touch more professionalism and extra motivation.
I used to run ultra-marathons. I know how hard it can be near the end, when it feels like you have no strength left. You feel like you can't go any further. But that is exactly the moment when you have to keep moving forward towards the finish line.
More than 62,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been trained in Britain over the last 4 years. In this give and take, the British and their partners are reaping increasing benefits from the Ukrainians' frontline experience.
And Christopher Morris is a defense analyst at the consulting firm Kali in Europe. I asked him how quickly drones are becoming the most important part of modern-day warfare.
I wouldn't say that drones are the most important part of modern warfare, but they're certainly amongst the most visible at the moment. With what you're seeing on the battlefield at the moment, it's not that what drones are doing is new, even. The kill chain that drones are using, effectively locating and then striking targets, that kill chain's been around for decades. Now, what has really changed is it's now cheap, highly visible, and it's operating at a really quite tremendous scale. Previously, the sensor to shoot a loop that we're seeing with things like a Shaheed only existed in rare and scarce and tightly controlled capabilities like, say, the US Reaper program. What we've seen since Ukraine is this capability has effectively become democratized and decentralized. And even now, if you look at like platoon level elements in Ukraine, they're running their own strike cycles with off-the-shelf kit and improvising where necessary. We're also seeing this at sea. Ukrainians have demonstrated that the same system can be applied at sea, in the maritime domain, where low-cost platforms can be used to take out much higher value naval assets when the situation is right. But when I say drones are important, they're still not changing the fundamentals. Like, drones do not seize and hold terrain. They cannot dictate or compel political outcomes on their own. What they do is effectively increase the cost of movements, increase the cost of concentrating your forces on the battlefield, and of course make what's going on that battlefield a lot more transparent. So ultimately, they're not replacing anything, but they are forcing both high-end militaries and more modest militaries to operate under a different set of conditions, most important of which is perhaps you're just constantly being perceived by your adversary, and also they're subjecting you to this constant attrition. Unfortunately, a lot of Western militaries simply are not built for that at this given moment.
And, given that point that you've just made, the fact that the militaries are not really built for that, I mean, the Ukrainians are getting a lot of expertise on how to deal with drones on the battlefield. Tell us a little bit more about this relationship. And we saw it a bit earlier in the piece that we aired. This relationship between Ukraine's expertise in drones and how important that is to its partners in the NATO alliance.
I think what Ukraine has been able to accomplish with drone expertise is absolutely remarkable, and it's very important that the West benefits from that. But there is a real critical risk that we're going to learn entirely the wrong lesson. Now, the first instinct is going to be look at some of the very interesting systems that the Ukrainians have been able to pioneer, both their FPV drones and, of course, their counter-drone solutions as well. But this is really the least interesting thing they've accomplished. Now, when we look at what Ukraine has built, the system is perhaps what is most important. What they've been able to do is build effectively an innovation pipeline that leads from their front line all the way back to their production, their prototyping, and ultimately back to the front line again. So you can see initiatives like Brave One that link government with military units and indeed with private firms that are producing new technology. What they then do is they build on these new solutions and iterate upon earlier designs. So what that means is effectively they are pioneering new solutions, they're tolerating failure, they're building disposable systems, and if something doesn't work, they can replace it very quickly. Now you contrast that with how you contrast that with how Western militaries are used to working. It's night and day. So if we look at a Western military procurement, it's optimized for the opposite. High accountability, not much tolerance for risk. So acquisition cycles tend to be very long. Standardization, particularly when you're working with allies, can be very important. And everything needs to be accountable. So it's very difficult to rapidly iterate and produce new solutions. Of course, you're not going to get the same level of innovation that the Ukrainians are exhibiting without accepting some really uncomfortable truths about what your military is in the current day. So yeah, NATO absolutely needs to effectively procure and acquire some of the solutions that the Ukrainians have. But it's not just about getting the technology that they have today. The technology that the Ukrainians are using today is probably going to be obsolete within 18 months. It's the system that they're using, this tolerance for risk, that is most important.
We have to leave it there. Christopher Morris, defense analyst at Kali in Europe. Thank you so much for your insights.
Pleasure. Thank you.